Hello and good afternoon. This is Ep02 here with a second edition of my introduction to Feed the Beast. I'll probably be referring to it just as FTB from now on, just because Feed the Beast is a bit of a mouthful. Before I get too far into my second video here regarding more machines and options for mods other than thermal expansion, wanted to first start off with full credit and full disclosure that I am a huge addict of watching the Direwolf20's videos. He is the man, the myth, the legend when it comes to video documentation. So if you ever need more details on, for example, thermal expansion, I'd highly recommend looking for Direwolf20 Mod Spotlight Thermal Expansion. That will get you a lot of good information on how the mods work. That's how I learned a lot of this stuff. I'm just kind of giving an overview of many different things so that you know where to go look. With that in mind, I will go ahead and get started. The next mod I'd like to cover is a mod called IndustrialCraft. We have seen just one or two things from IndustrialCraft prior, but the mod IndustrialCraft has starts out with a lot of similar capabilities to the thermal expansion stuff. We had a pulverizer and a redstone furnace prior. With IndustrialCraft, we have a macerator and an electric furnace. They do pretty much the exact same thing. A macerator doubles your ores. It cuts things up and gives you 2 iron dust for 1 iron ore, etc. Electric furnace, similar concept. It cooks things. It uses IndustrialCraft's power instead of thermal expansion's power, obviously. Now, I did a very similar thing here where cables are missing, and that's intentional. Because before I even get started into connecting machines up and how these work, I want to start from the beginning. IndustrialCraft requires rubber. This is an IndustrialCraft rubber tree. If you run around in the world, you will eventually find these. It's most notable by the shape. You can see the leaves up top sticking up. That is a very normal shape. And if you see that, that's probably what you're looking for if you're hunting down IndustrialCraft rubber. Be aware that this is IndustrialCraft rubber wood, and there is a space in the middle of rubber and wood. There's another mod that adds rubber wood. Well, that also has a space, I guess. This is Mine Factory Reloaded rubber. They'll both work, but if you can get this type of rubber, it's better. I'll show you why in a second. So what you'll notice as you're looking at this here, there's little dots on this tree here. One of the very first tools you ever make if you're going to get into IndustrialCraft is a tree tap. A tree tap is incredibly easy. It's just some wood logs, or wood planks. Once you have a tree tap, and you know what, I'm going to go ahead and grab the rest of this because I'll use it in a second. Once you have a tree tap, and once you've found rubber wood, right click. That gave me a couple pieces of sticky resin. We'll show you why I did that in a second. You can also go here, grab that, and that one gave me another 2. Now, you can probably find a little more if you dig around. Sometimes the logs up top will have additional resin spots, not always. So be it. There's one. So this is the hunt for rubber in the beginning. And what you can also do is if you keep hacking down all these leaves, you'll eventually get a sapling, and this works like other saplings. You just replant them near your base, and then you're good to go. You can grow up some rubber trees and get a good start going. Now notice as I tapped those little rubber holes, they went dark. If you look really carefully, there still kind of is a square there. You might be able to get rubber a second time if you tap that, but I would not recommend it because you can actually dry up the hole and then it'll never grow back. If you leave it like this, you only tap it once, they will grow back, and then you can tap them again later. It takes, I want to say, like a real life half hour, something like that. I don't know exactly. So now, looking on the note, once you have sticky resin that comes off those trees, you have a couple options with that. I'm going to hit U, like we learned in the last video. And by default, when you're first starting out in IndustrialCraft, you do need to put sticky resin into any furnace at all, and you'll get rubber balls. That is great, it works, but let's see here. If you have an extractor machine, which requires power, so you kind of need to use the first recipe to get started. If you can get an extractor machine set up kind of early, you can then triple your rubber output, so that's kind of handy. Now, let's pretend we don't have that for a second. You kind of have to drop one in there, get it cooked up, and you can go from there. So once you have a good deal of resin stock going, you probably want a stack, maybe a stack and a half. you can then start going and do various things to get power generated. There's two ways I like to get started. There is something flying at me. Hold on. Let me get rid of this. Oh, we had a sapling drop off the tree. That's why I had something. Rubber tree sapling came at me. Distracted, distracted, distracted. All right, so once you've gotten started and you've gotten your rubber balls going, there's two main ways I like to make power. These are a little more complicated. These are solar panels that will provide industrial craft based power just from the sun. So as long as they can see the sky and there's nothing directly above them, and they don't care how high, but as long as there's nothing directly above them, they will provide a power. Just a very, very little bit. If you see the tooltip up top there, it's producing an output of 1 EU per tick. That's not really that much. It'll do some things for you. There's another unit here called a generator. This will take coal and wood and all kinds of other flammable stuff and convert that into EU. So we can go ahead and throw one in there, and that will go ahead and build up some EU here. So that's all great. Same concepts still apply, though. You probably want to save it in some type of battery, as with thermal expansions equipment. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to connect a copper cable. You can go with a tin cable, but I like to use copper just because it works for a little while longer. There's power tiers, and there's tin cables, which are the early stuff. There's copper cables, which are the mid stuff, and there's other options later. I just go with copper. So what I've done here is connected this cable, and now this battery, this bat box, is taking the power out of the generator, and it's taking power from the solar panels, and it's charging the bat box up. This is great because, one, you have free power. Once you've made these, and they're very complicated to make, you have free power coming off the sun, and all you really need is a bed, and you can get the sun to come back up. So that's pretty simple for getting at least a little bit of power going. If you have extra charcoal, you can throw charcoal or coal or wood or whatever else in a generator, and that will make you some power as well. So once you have this bat box reasonably charged up, and you don't have to wait, but I have done a very similar thing back here. I have copper cables, kind of like what I did with the energy conduits over there. And right now, this little lightning bolt here is empty. Watch this. I'm going to go ahead and connect one cable, and now it's just barely starting. It's going to slowly charge up here. And now my macerator actually has power, as well as my furnace, and I also made an extractor as well. So now I can go ahead, stick my resin in here, and this will go ahead and convert into 3 rubber balls. So we should get 15 rubber balls out of this. Now, this isn't the most fastest machine in the world, and you'll find out that with IndustrialCraft, that's very common. Like, just to compare, oh, this isn't going to have power, is it? Nope, all right. Well, thermal expansion, machines are pretty quick. With IndustrialCraft, to start out with no upgrades at all, with no advances, this takes a bit of time. I mean, the progress bar is shaped a little weird, but this is not the fastest machine in the world. The nice thing about it, as I just alluded to, is you can upgrade this speed. So again, like with thermal expansion, we can get 2 pieces of, well, in this case, crushed iron ore, but it's effectively dust. And this works the exact same way as with thermal expansion. You take the 2 crushed iron ore, which effectively is 2 dusts, cook them up, and each one should give you 1 iron ingot. So again, you have doubled your resources. And like I was saying, if you are up for the complexity of solar panels, then this power is kind of free, as long as you can wait for it. So we have our 2 iron ingots cooked up like normal. We have our rubber balls cooking up, and that is great. And now we have a nice basic IndustrialCraft setup. There's other advanced machines that you don't necessarily need to get into for a good long while, but you can actually take the crushed iron ore, the crushed iron ore that I got from the macerator, and instead of putting it in the furnace, IndustrialCraft has an option for boosting how much you get by putting it through an ore washing plant. This is much more complicated because it needs water as well as power, and it eats a lot of power, so you don't want to bother with this pretty early. And then the thermal centrifuge is a whole different story for much more advanced machines and recipes later. The induction furnace is actually really nice, and I do not have it set up very well. Hold on one second. You're getting a sneak peek of where I'm going from here, and I don't have that turned on. What I should have done was had that powered on from the beginning there. The induction furnace is a really fast furnace. It takes a while to power up. It's going to, now that it has some vague sense of power, and only barely, because we have a bat box and it's running on solar and it is nighttime. I actually have night vision on, so this is what it actually is in terms of darkness here, and this is me with my night vision on. I'll show you my armor later. So when we looked in the solar panel before, there was a little sun icon here. Right now it is not there. There is no sun icon there on the bottom. You'll also note if I hover over this, up top it's saying stored 0 out of 2 EU. That's because the sun's gone. So if we cheat and say dawn please, then it will make a liar. There it is, sun. The sun will come up, the sun will light up the solar panel, and we have power again. And it's doing something. It's not very fast, but it's doing something. And eventually, this induction furnace will actually start to heat up. This does drain a little bit of electricity, so you really want to make sure you have some good power feed, but this is an advanced one that will cook 2 stacks of things at once and dump it out the 2 different slots here. And it is pretty fast, but we might have to come back to this at the end of the video. So, in my previous video, I was talking about thermal expansion. Thermal expansion is a great mod to start with because it is safe, because it is gentle, because it's forgiving. If you hook things up wrong, it just simply won't run. No big deal. IndustrialCraft, it will eventually, and it's a complicated story, but it will eventually go back to its normal behavior, which is if you give a machine too much power, it's going to explode. If you note here on the little tooltip up top, it says max power of 32 EU per tick. Well, this bat box is putting out 32 EU per tick, so we are safe. If you had a larger bat box, and there's 4 different types of bat boxes, and they have some weird names, they're all letters. But if you find one that is putting out more than 32 EU per tick, and you pump it into a macerator, and we have crushed iron ore, by the way, and you have too much power going into this, the macerator will just pop, and the macerator will be gone. You'll have totally wasted this machine. Now, technically, right now, if you're familiar with FTB in just a vague sense, and you're looking at going, mine isn't exploding, I have a million EU going, no, not a million, but you get my point. I have a lot of EU going into the machine. It's not exploding yet. Well, right now, as of beginning of 2014, it's not set to explode because IndustrialCraft is kind of sort of an experimental mode, beta mode. You might find that the explosions are going to get turned back on later. So we'll go into transformers and downgrading power at some point here, but be aware that right now your machines might not explode, but you probably should be safe if you're updating your pack, because if you automatically update a mod pack and you get a new version of everything and IndustrialCraft gets updated and explosions are turned on, you can very easily lose all your IndustrialCraft machines in one fell swoop. Not recommended. So I was alluding to various power grades, like this is the copper cable is kind of a mid-tier. Well, this is kind of the general concept, and IndustrialCraft gets into some complexity here with the different transformers and different power outputs, etc. So I have here an example, and I actually have it backwards here. This tin cable is kind of like the lowest grade power. It works fine for the basic stuff. As you start getting into faster and faster machines, you're going to find that the machines are very what should be more powerful, what should be faster machines will not run at full capacity because they're not getting that much power. But you can take high or medium voltage and with a transformer downgrade it. So say you have medium amount of power coming in here, you can make it low voltage. You see the LV transformer up top, and that will take it down to the 32 EU per tick. And I lose track of all the numbers. I'm pretty sure this is 128 in here. So we have an MV transformer which will bring stuff down to 128, I believe, and then to the cable. and then the transformer, and then this is safe to hook up to pretty much anything. It just might be slow. And the next step up, I want to say, is 512 EU per tick, but I can show you how to find all that stuff. And you get the gold safe power cable coming out of an HV transformer, and the top of the HV transformer can take an awful lot. I don't know what the input capacity is on that, but glass fiber cable is kind of the top. Glass fiber cable is incredibly expensive unless you have an absolute insane amount of diamonds. So let me go ahead, I'm going to do an NEI search, and I'm going to just search for cable. Now there's many different types of cables. There's a couple other mods that use cables. We can for now ignore Project Red and the applied energistics cables. That's a whole different episode. So we have, as I was saying, the let's go insulated tin cable. This allows 32 EU per tick. The cables themselves, if you give them too much power, they will pop as well. And then I was saying the copper cable is the next step up. It takes 128. And then from there, gold, yes, gold does take 512 EU. And then the glass fiber takes 8,000 something EU per tick. And it looks like there's actually a insulated HV cable somewhere in the middle that I may have missed in my example here, but you kind of get the point that bigger cable, more power, but may cause explosions if hooked up to the wrong machine. So just kind of be safe and think out what's connected to what before you plot that one last piece of cable in, because you may regret it. The other thing you'd be aware of, and when I was showing you in game the transformers, you can search for transformers. And now here are your LV, your MV, your HV, and then there's also an EV, which is a bit overkill for most setups, but if you get there, great, more power to you. So this actually does show you power ratings of, it puts out 32 on the low side, and it accepts in 128 on the high side. Likewise, 128 and 512, 512 and 2048, 2048 and 192. So I did completely miss a step here. I probably should have put the insulated HV cable between an HV and an EV transformer, and then put the glass fiber on the top of the EV transformer. So there's an in and there's an out. I was just alluding to, well, how do you tell that? What you'll notice as you're looking at these blocks, and let me actually pull the cables off here, because that might make things a little simpler to see. There are two different types of sides to these blocks. There's a 5-dot side, and there's a 1-dot 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 side. These all pretty much work in the same exact concept, in that the 5-dot side takes the high voltage, takes whatever the bigger number is. It's safer to put the big stuff in on this side, and then by default the transformer puts low voltage out any other side. And that's true for the bottom as well. The bottom has a single dot on it. So these are all facing the same direction. You can, if you wish, and a lot of people will recommend, you do a fixed step down on this. This is the standard transformer interface. There's options here for pushing power from high to low. There's also options for pushing power from low to high and stepping it up. IndustrialCraft gets into some fanciness where you actually lose power over an extended distance, and I can't quote all the numbers on exactly how all that works, but just be aware, if you go over like 8 or 10 blocks worth of cable length, you might start losing just a little bit of power. It's not too bad until you get much longer cable runs. But doing a fixed step down is generally a good idea if you are doing high power in on one side and low power in on any other side, because if you were to accidentally apply a redstone signal to this, it might actually invert the power, and then things would get confused. So if you just do a fixed step down, then you know how these things are going to behave, and they're going to ignore redstone signal. So with thermal expansion, we had a crescent hammer, and that was the official tool for modifying and disconnecting things. Well, let me get some of this out of my way here. There's an official wrench for IndustrialCraft as well, not a hammer. Now, the wrench for IndustrialCraft, there's actually a couple different grades here. There's a basic wrench, which again is the IndustrialCraft2 wrench. That's kind of important. And this is the safe way to pop a machine off. If I were to take my pick and break this, sometimes you get your machine back. And maybe a generator is a bad example. And maybe I want my magnet turned on to suck things in. Alright, generator is a bad example. Here, I'm going to take my pick to a solar panel. What did I get back? I just got back a generator. I picked a solar panel. Where'd my solar panel go? Well, because I did not use the proper tool on this, the machine went down to a previous component of it. If we look up the recipe for a solar panel, the basic IndustrialCraft solar panel, and there's actually more advanced ones, but the basics, no. The basic recipe for a basic solar panel has a generator in it and some other things. So when I took a pick to the solar panel, I didn't get back all of this. I didn't get back this. I didn't get back this. I just got back the generator. So be careful with that, because if you just start taking picks to machines, you probably won't get back what you want. Now, with a basic wrench, this should, let me emphasize the word should, take care of your problem. You should get the solar panel back. Now, if we get really unlucky here, like 1 out of every 10 times, and I'm not going to sit here for forever, but about one, oh, it just did it. 1 out of every 10 times, the basic wrench will not get you your solar panel back. So you really, when you're placing IndustrialCraft machines, you really want to make sure you know you're going to leave it there, or you get an electric wrench. The electric wrench is much more complicated to make. It actually requires a basic wrench and a motor and a couple other things. And if you can, once you make an electric wrench, you'll get it in mode normal, and you'll actually need to charge the wrench up. So you can, you know what, let me put a solar panel back on, and let me convert it back to daytime, please, because I want light. You can actually take your electric wrench, if it was empty, and stick it in your solar panel, and it will charge right in here. Likewise, if you have just a generator, you can take your electric wrench, put it in there, and of course a bat box, and put it in there, and that will charge it as well. So all these machines can charge things, and that becomes more useful down the line, because IndustrialCraft has a lot of other tools and weapons and armor and things that will all need power in order to be charged, in order to be useful. So if you have an electric wrench, and if you also have your keyboard binding set correctly, then you can convert it into lossless mode. And lossless mode will allow you to pick machines up, and you will not lose them. Now, I'm actually using some fancy armor here. Let me do this without the fancy armor. And I have a solar panel, and I have my electric wrench. And note the EU down bottom, 12,000 out of 12,000. I'm going to go ahead, hit that. I got my solar panel back. That's great. But my electric wrench just discharged like crazy. That is because the lossless mode takes a lot of power. So I'm going to stick some coal in there. And now my wrench is charging up. So the long and the short of it is, IndustrialCraft has layers and layers and layers. And if you're not aware of all the layers, and you're not willing to work through mistakes, then IndustrialCraft is probably not the best mod for you. There are certain examples and certain reasons why I really love certain components of IndustrialCraft, and it's absolutely magnificent to use later. But early game, maybe you want to have a couple other resources already set up before you start messing with this. Now, the other thing to be aware of is that I have a electric wrench in normal mode and an electric wrench in lossless mode. The keyboard binding for the wrench, and really for IndustrialCraft mode changing in general, is the M key, but M is used by like 3 other mods, depending on what mod pack you're using. It's used, I believe, by Railcraft for locomotive control. It's also, I believe, used by some map mods. They might actually pull up a full screen map on you. You might have to M again to close that out. So in order to get your wrench into lossless mode, you actually have to go into escape, options, controls, and then browse around in here and look for how many different things have an M. And you need to start moving these around, or find the IndustrialCraft mode switch key, and you change this, and then you can actually get the wrench into different modes. So that's just something to be aware of. You definitely need to track that down and figure out your key bindings, because by default a lot of it is all messed up, or overlapping, I should say, not really messed up. So I was talking about upgrades, and I'll get to that in a second. I was talking about upgrades. This induction furnace, once it actually is finally powered up, will be really fast and really nice to use, but we're just not making enough power to really make it practical. If you have some more fancy toys, you have a lot of heavy-duty equipment, and you have probably some automatic crafting going on, this is kind of some of the top-tier equipment. This is a high-voltage solar array. This is like 512 of those basic solar panels all compressed together. This puts out an immense amount of power. I don't know exactly what the power output is, but I have it stored in an MFSU, which is a super high powerful battery. I have an electric furnace here, and I have transformer upgrades inside the machine. This is equivalent to having 4 of these all stepping the power down for you. So what this is basically saying is I can take pretty much any type of power you want, and the max power allowed in there is an incredible, crazy amount. I think that math is probably wrong. I'm going to take half of it out, and it's claiming it can take 8,000 EU per tick. I don't know if that's right. I would generally put 3 or 4 of them in there just for safety's sake. They're not cheap, but if you have an HV solar array, you probably can afford it. So by default, this has a lot of power available to it, but it's not that fast. So what's going on? Why are you saying this is so great? Well, overclockers. Overclockers is yet another IndustrialCraft upgrade, and there's actually 3 or 4 upgrades you can play around with. Not necessarily in this video though. The overclocker upgrade will decrease process time, and it will increase power consumption. So just one of them by itself decreases process time to 70%, but it also increases your power usage up to 160. So you're wasting power in order to get things faster. So if we have a whole bunch of them, it's incredibly fast and incredibly inefficient. But if we drop that in there and we go ores, that is how fast it can process. That was almost half a stack, and it just chewed through it like it was nothing. Almost to the point where I want to see it again, because it's kind of fun to watch that go. Pull you out, go. Yeah, towards endgame, this is kind of what you get used to, and then you start a world over, and you're like, how on earth could I have survived with a vanilla furnace? So you get spoiled by this really quick. Now, what I alluded to over here, and you've seen me as I'm moving around and jumping around, I have flight capability built in and all that good stuff, and I have my night vision stuff. That's because I have these modular power suit gear items on. And let me just take these off for a second. Obviously now I'm just normal vanilla Steve as far as travel capability is concerned. One of the very handy and useful early-ish, mid-ish game tools is an electric jetpack. I will go for these as soon as I possibly can, because this is a pretty cheap way. If you can get into the nether and get 2 pieces of glowstone, this is a pretty cheap way for basic flight. Now watch out, because when you fall, you're going to take damage. That kind of hurt a little bit. But if you can fly up and then you fall down and you kind of tap your spacebar as you're falling and you kind of flutter it, then you won't take any damage as long as you're paying attention to where the ground is. So I highly recommend getting started on one of these as early as possible, because then travel in any way, shape, or form gets so much easier. It's not the quickest thing in the world as far as I'm concerned, but it's absolutely amazing if all you know about it is vanilla. So let me get back over here and stop fluttering around, and I will get my jetpack off and put my super gear on. And you know what? This wasn't intended to be just a single episode just on IndustrialCraft, but I've talked too much. So I think I'm going to wrap it up here. I hope you did enjoy. Please, if you've watched this far, please do give me a like. And I will go ahead and I'll proceed on some more storage options and other fancy redstone things in my next episode. Enjoy.